The sun was sinking low over the wide desert when the young woman stepped in front of the Apache warrior. Her voice steady, even though her heartbeat trembled like a loose fence gate in a rising wind. Trails of gold dust drifted across the dry ground as if the land itself was listening. She had walked alone across the hard country to reach him, carrying a decision that weighed heavier than anything she had ever faced. Folks in her small settlement whispered many things about the Apache people, but nothing had prepared her for standing a few steps away from a man like him, a man shaped by the land, by silence, and by the kind of strength that came from surviving things others never could. Her name was Lyria. A woman known for her quiet ways and sharp mind. She had never caused trouble for her kin, never raised her voice, never turned away from her duties. Yet here she was, breaking every rule she had been taught. Her skirt brushed against the desert stones as she stood tall, looking straight into the eyes of the warrior the locals called Ked, a man whose presence carried the weight of untold stories. His stance was firm, his gaze unblinking, and the wind pushed gently at the loose strands of his dark hair. He waited, saying nothing, though the shift in his eyes revealed he was curious as to why she had come so far alone. Lyria knew people would call her foolish. They would say she had lost her senses. But she also knew this was the only path left for her. The old farmhouse she grew up in, the land stretching behind it, the water rights, the cattle, everything her father had earned through years of back-breaking labor, all of it now rested on her shoulders. She was the last of her bloodline, the only one who could carry the family name. Yet she had no husband and no children, and her father had made it clear before passing that the inheritance would only be fully hers if she secured the future of their lineage. It was an old rule he believed in more than anything, something tied to tradition and pride. Lyria had spent months trying to find a man willing to stay loyal, strong, and honest for the long road ahead. Every one of them turned her away when they learned her conditions, or worse, when they felt entitled to control her life. She was done with their empty promises. That evening, with the color of dusk spreading over the desert like a faded quilt, she had made her choice. She'd heard of Ked, the Apache warrior who lived alone in the foothills, a man who had protected wandering families more than once, a man with honor carved into his actions rather than his words. People spoke of him with respect, though some carried fear in their voices. Unsure of what he might do if a stranger trespassed on his quiet land, Lyria had no fear left in her. She had a purpose, and she believed he was the one who might understand it. She took a slow breath, her palms sweating against the heat. She had rehearsed her words dozens of times, but now that she faced him, everything felt far more real than she imagined. Ked watched her with calm intensity, waiting patiently. As though he had all the time in the world. "I will give you my inheritance if you give me 2 children," she finally said, the words steady. Though her heart pounded so strong, she thought he might hear it in the stillness of the air. The moment stretched between them. The desert wind grew quieter, almost respectful of what had just been spoken. Lyria felt a strange relief wash over her simply because the words had escaped her lips. She had said them, and they could not be taken back. Ked did not move, yet something shifted in the space around him. Lyria felt the weight of his attention settle on her, not sharply, but deeply, as though he was trying to understand the truth beneath her strange request. His expression remained unreadable, but the tension in the air said he had heard every layer of meaning in her voice. She stood tall, refusing to look away. Even as the back of her neck warmed under the intensity of his gaze, he was a man who had faced storms, battles, losses. He was not easily startled, but her offer was unlike anything he had expected. His people valued children beyond measure, not as possessions, but as blessings from the land itself. To hear such a request from a settler woman shocked him more than he cared to show. Lyria felt her breath tighten when he stepped closer. She had expected him to refuse immediately or laugh at her boldness. Instead, he studied her face with a seriousness that made her spine tighten. He seemed to be searching for something, weighing whether this woman was genuine or desperate, or hiding a truth she dared not reveal. Her fingers curled gently as she held her ground. "You crossed the desert alone to say this," he said, his voice low and strong. "Why would a woman give her land to a man she does not know?" His question was fair, and she had known it would come. She gathered her courage, reminding herself why she had chosen him rather than any man in her settlement. She had seen the way Ked carried himself. The quiet discipline in his movements, the calm strength that came from hardship and honor. She had chosen him because he was not like the others. He did not chase wealth or status. He lived with purpose. She needed a man like that to secure what her father had built. "My land is worth nothing if no one lives to claim it after me," she said. "I need someone who will honor the future of my family. Someone strong. Someone who keeps his word. And I believe you are that man." Her honesty unsettled him more than her offer. He had heard settlers speak of land as if it were gold. But she spoke of it with responsibility and sorrow, as though the inheritance she carried was a burden she refused to let die. The desert breeze carried the scent of sagebrush and sun-baked soil, and the world felt strangely quiet around them. Lyria took another step closer. "I need two children. That is the condition for the inheritance. I cannot do this alone. I do not need a husband if he sees me as a prize or something to control. I need a father for the future. A man who stands with honor. A man who understands what life demands." Ked's jaw tightened. He had lived without ties for a long time, his heart scarred by old losses he did not speak of. The idea of children stirred something buried deep in him. But he also sensed she was holding something back. Something that made her request far heavier than her words revealed. She felt the dryness of her throat, the heat on her skin, the fear that he might walk away without a word. But she had come too far to step back now. Her voice softened, but her resolve remained firm. "If you refuse, I understand. But I will not return to my land without trying." The warrior raised his head slightly, the fading light catching the strong lines of his face. His silence stretched longer than before, and Lyria wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Her pulse hammered, and the desert around them began to cool with the approaching night. Ked finally spoke, but not with the answer she expected. "What are you not telling me?" he asked quietly. And just as the first star appeared above the horizon, her breath caught, because the truth she feared most was the very thing she knew she would have to reveal next. She had no choice. And if she told him, everything could change. Lyria felt her breath falter when Ked asked that question. It struck deeper than she expected, as though he could see the truth hiding behind her steady voice. The desert around them had grown darker, the fading light stretching long shadows across the ground. She looked toward the far mountains to gather her courage before she answered, but the words tangled in her chest. She had spent months protecting what she carried inside her, guarding it from judgment and whispers. Now she stood before a man she barely knew, forced to open the part of her life she had buried so carefully. Ked did not step closer this time. He remained still, giving her room, giving her time. That alone unsettled her even more. Most men pushed or demanded answers. He simply waited. Lyria swallowed, her fingers brushing lightly against her skirt as if she needed something to ground herself. She knew she could not bring her truth all at once. She had to start from the beginning. "From the place where everything had gone wrong, my father passed last winter," she finally said, her voice low but steady. "The land became mine, but only if I fulfilled the condition he left behind. He believed the family name should not end with me. He believed a woman alone cannot carry a future large enough for the land he built." Ked listened without interrupting. His face did not soften, nor did it harden. It remained unreadable, like the desert stone that never revealed its secrets. She went on, her gaze drifting to the cactus silhouettes standing like silent guards around them. "After he passed, many men came offering marriage, not for me, but for the land. They wanted control, not partnership. Some spoke sweetly until they learned I would keep the title and my name. Others said a woman like me should not hold land at all." She paused, feeling her stomach twist with old anger. "I refused all of them." Ked nodded slightly, acknowledging her words. Yet she sensed he still waited for the deeper truth. She wet her dry lips and continued. "I thought I still had time to decide my future. But then something happened on the ranch. Something I didn't tell anyone except the old doctor in the next town. He warned me to keep quiet until I found someone I trusted." Her throat tightened as she chose her next words carefully. "This is what I haven't told you." Ked's expression sharpened. Not with anger, but with recognition that something serious was coming. Lyria breathed in. "There are men who believe land should pass to them by force, if not by choice. One of them was determined to take mine. He tried to convince my father before his passing and after the funeral. He convinced himself that I would eventually give up." Her voice grew tense, each word carved from old fear. "When I refused him, he turned threatening. He began coming near the ranch too often, watching from a distance, circling at dusk. One night he forced his way into the barn while I was there." Ked's jaw clenched slightly, a subtle sign that her words hit him hard. But Lyria lifted her hand quickly, needing him to know what she had carried alone. "I escaped before he laid a hand on me. But I learned one thing that night. He wasn't after me. He was after the inheritance. He said I had no right to it and that he would take it from me one way or another." She bit the inside of her cheek to steady herself. "I reported him to the sheriff. But the sheriff said he had no proof and that the man was respected in town. All he did was warn him to stay away." Ked understood now that her request was not born from foolishness, but from a desperate need for protection, legacy, and safety. Still, she wasn't finished. She inhaled again, slower this time. "That man will return," she said softly. "I feel it. I've heard him outside the fence at night. I've seen hoofprints that don't belong to my horses. He believes I'm weak because I'm alone." Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion of keeping this weight inside for too long. "I need children because the inheritance demands it. But I need a father for them because danger is coming for the land, and I cannot fight it alone." The desert breeze finally moved, sweeping across the sand with a whispering sound, as if acknowledging every word she had confessed. Lyria lifted her chin, refusing to let her fear show even now. She had come all this way because she believed Ked was different from any man she had met before. Ked's silence stretched longer this time. He looked out toward the mountains as if searching for something far beyond what lay before him. His thoughts traveled through memories he rarely allowed himself to revisit. Once long ago, he had known what it meant to protect someone. He had known the weight of responsibility, the fear of failing those he cared for. Loss had carved deep marks into him, marks that had never truly healed. He turned his gaze back to her, studying the firmness behind her trembling voice. Lyria did not beg, did not plead. She offered truth and responsibility in equal measure, believing he might understand both. There was strength in her honesty, a rare kind he respected. Still, he couldn't ignore the risk that came with stepping into another person's battle. "You ask for children and protection," Ked said quietly, "but you offer your land. That means nothing to me." Lyria nodded. She had expected that. "I know. You are not a man who chases wealth. That is why I chose you." He didn't reply. She took one careful step closer, her voice even softer now. "I am not asking you to be my husband. I am asking you to stand with me in something bigger than either of us. I know you lost people. I know you walk alone for reasons of your own. I understand that. But I see honor in you, and I trust your strength." Ked looked away for a moment, the muscles in his shoulders tightening. The past she mentioned stirred something raw inside him. He had indeed lost people. He had lost much more than most settlers ever knew. He had sworn never to bind himself to another life again, afraid that he might not survive another loss. But the desert had a way of guiding fate. And part of him wondered whether this meeting was meant to challenge the wall he had built around his heart. Still, he could not give her an answer. Not yet. Lyria sensed his hesitation. She didn't rush him. Instead, she continued to reveal the truth he needed to hear before making any decision. "There is another reason I came to you," she said, her voice filled with reluctant honesty. "The old doctor told me something about my health, something that changed everything." Ked stiffened slightly, his attention narrowing on her. "I might not have much time," she confessed. "Not because of sickness, but because stress has taken a toll on me over the years. The doctor warned that if I do not secure my future soon, the land will pass into the wrong hands. My body has grown weaker. My sleep is broken. My nerves are worn." He said, I must secure the inheritance before the stress breaks me. Ked watched her closely. There was no weakness in her posture, but he saw the truth in her eyes. She had fought alone for too long. You came to me as your last hope, he said. She nodded once. Yes, you are my last hope. Ked's chest rose slowly as he took a deep breath. The weight of her words pressed heavily upon him, stirring something old, something he thought he had buried deep in the quiet hills he called home. His past warned him to stay distant. His heart whispered something else. The sky had grown darker, stars scattering across the horizon like sparks from a distant fire. The desert night wrapped around them, still and expectant. Finally, Ked spoke. His voice steady but unreadable. You trust me, he said, but you do not know the storms of my past. Lyria swallowed. Then tell me. For the first time, his eyes shifted away from the mountains and back to her with a depth that carried stories she could not yet imagine. There are things you must understand before you tie your future to mine, Ked said, his tone lower than before. Things that have followed me across many seasons, and if you stand beside me, they may come for you too. Lyria's breath caught again, but she did not step back, and in the stillness of that moment, the air tightened between them, as if the desert itself waited for him to reveal what he had stayed silent about for years. Ked stood in the deepening twilight, his profile cut in sharp lines against the rising moon. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, as if he had made a quiet peace with himself, he turned slightly so she could see more than the hard mask he usually held in place. The guarded look in his eyes shifted into something older, something shaped by years of loss and distrust. Lyria felt the pull of it, like a silent current under the surface of still water. She knew whatever he was about to say would change the way she saw him. I once had a family, he began, his voice low, not by blood, but by responsibility. My younger sister, my uncle, the children of our people. The land we lived on was far beyond these hills. Traders came first, then soldiers, then men hungry for gold and pasture. They wanted to force us away from the river we had lived beside since before my grandfather's time. When my uncle stood against them, they burned our homes and called it law. Lyria's chest tightened. The calm strength in his voice made his story even more painful. He did not tell it to gain her pity. He told it to make her understand the storms he carried behind his quiet eyes. She listened without speaking, knowing he needed the space to let the memories rise and settle in their own way. I fought them, Ked continued. I did what I could. But a man cannot stand alone against a tide of men backed by the badge and the gun. The children scattered to other camps. Some of our people traveled north. Others refused to leave the graves of their kin and paid the price for standing their ground. I survived, but the ones I loved were taken from me. His jaw clenched silently. Since then, I have kept to myself. I live on the edges. I protect travelers when I can. I work for those who treat me with respect. But I do not tie my life to anyone. That way, when the storm returns, it takes only me. Lyria let the weight of his confession sink in. The inheritance she fought for suddenly felt different in the shadow of his story. Her battle was against a greedy settler and a law twisted in favor of the powerful. His battle had been against a world that decided his people were an obstacle to be cleared away. Yet here they stood, two lives with different scars, both circling the same question about whether to trust each other with the future. The men who took your land? She asked softly. Do they still hunt you? Ked gave a measured shrug. Some of them are dead. Some have moved on. But men with the same hunger still walk this country. They see my face and think of stories told around their tables. To them, I am trouble, no matter how quietly I live. If they learn I stand beside a ranch woman claiming land others want, they will not let it rest. Your enemy is not the only one who may come. The danger that had been a shadow in Lyria's thoughts now took shape. Her problem with the land thief was already enough. The idea of drawing more trouble to her door made her stomach knot. Yet when she glanced at Ked, she also saw the depth of his caution. He was not protecting only himself. He was warning her honestly, giving her every chance to turn away from this path. I already live with danger, she said at last. If I face it alone, I will break. If I turn away from you now, I will return to the ranch still hunted, still without the family my father demanded I build. I am asking you to share risk with me. I cannot promise safety. Only the truth. Ked studied her in silence. He had known many settlers who spoke of courage only when the danger was far away. Lyria was different. Her courage came wrapped in quiet fear, but it was courage all the same. He could see that she had weighed her choices, that this was not an impulsive act. While they stood on the desert ridge, another story began unfolding miles away. In the small town of Arroyo Bend, a man named Calder leaned against the rough banister of the saloon porch. Watching the evening riders pass by, he was broad-shouldered, with a polished hat and boots that had never walked a furrowed field. His smile never reached his eyes, but people tolerated him because he paid for drinks without blinking and spoke to the sheriff like an old friend. Calder was the man Lyria had reported, the one who believed her land should have been his by legacy of power, not by any written law. He twirled a coin between his fingers, thinking of the ranch that lay just beyond town, thinking of the woman who had denied him. To him, the West was a place where the bold took what they wanted, and the timid were swept aside. His version of old American pride meant standing at the top of the hill and looking down on those who had less. He believed Lyria would eventually give in. After all, a woman alone could not keep cattle, water rights, and property lines safe. He knew the law bent easily around men like him. It always had. The town sheriff, Doran, stepped out beside him, tugging his suspenders into place. Doran was older, with graying hair and tired eyes. He understood Calder more than he admitted, but he also knew the town needed peace more than drama. "You planning another ride out to that ranch?" the sheriff asked in a careful tone. Calder smiled mildly. "Just looking after a neighbor. Wouldn't want her to mistake my concern for pressure." Doran watched him under heavy lids. "You know what I told you? No trouble." "That woman's been through enough," Calder chuckled. "Of course. I'm a patient man. She'll come around. With no husband, no family, and half the town talking, she'll see sense soon enough." The sheriff looked away uncomfortable, but did nothing more. It was easier to trust time than stir up a fight with a man who had money and friends in higher places. Yet deep inside, he worried. He knew Lyria's stubborn streak. He also knew Calder had a habit of pushing people until something snapped. That combination had the feel of a dry field waiting for a single spark. Back on the ridge, the night had fallen fully. A cool breath moved over the desert. Ked motioned toward a small cluster of rocks near his camp, where a faint bed of coals glowed in the darkness. He did not invite her with grand words. He simply walked toward the fire, expecting that if she trusted him, she would follow. Lyria hesitated only a moment before stepping after him. The firelight painted the ground with a warm glow when they reached it, and she sank onto a flat stone opposite him. The desert sky opened above them, filled with stars. It made her feel small and strangely safe at the same time. They spoke a little while. Ked added a log to the coals. She could tell his mind was moving, measuring paths ahead, counting risks she could not see. When he finally lifted his eyes again, she braced herself. "You say you need 2 children to hold this inheritance," he said slowly. "But children are not promises. They are lives. They carry their own hearts, their own paths. If I give you what you ask, I will not walk away from them like a stranger with a completed bargain. I would stay tied to them." Lyria's breath softened. "That is what I hope for. Not a quick trade. A future where they know who their father is, where they know he stood for something." He nodded, as though that answer aligned with what little he was willing to consider. Still, doubt hovered in his expression. "Your town will not welcome an Apache man tied to your land. Some will say you brought shame to your father's name. Others will say I forced you. I've lived my life by other people's approval," she replied quietly. "It has not given me peace. My father cared more about strength than gossip. If he could see you, I believe he would respect you more than any of those men in town. As for shame, I feel none in standing beside a man with honor." There was a softness in her voice that Ked had not heard before. something that carried respect, and something else he hesitated to name. That softness unsettled him more than the talk of danger. He had learned to walk alone because it meant he did not have to worry about the hearts of others. Now this woman spoke as if she was ready to tie her fate to his without one clear promise from him in return. The tension between them twisted tighter like a rope pulled from both ends. Far away, in the dark shadows near Lyria's ranch, hoofbeats pressed into loose dirt, Calder sat atop his horse just beyond the fence line, watching the quiet house. Only one lamp burned in the small window. He imagined Lyria pacing inside, anxious and worried. In reality, she was miles away beside a desert fire, but he did not know that yet. He only saw what he wanted to see, a woman slowly wearing down under loneliness. He told himself he was patient, but something sharper simmered beneath his calm expression. He felt insulted by her refusal. In his mind, no woman with as few choices as Lyria should have denied him. He turned his horse slowly, studying the layout of her land. The direction of the barn doors, the location of the corral. His mind worked in cold, careful lines. When he finally rode back toward town, carried with him a plan he had not fully shaped, but knew he would soon desire to test. Back at the fire, Ked finally broke the silence. "If I agree to stand beside you, the storms of your world and mine will meet on your land," he said. "Your enemy will not back away because of me. Those who have long memories of my people may add their voices against us. You may lose friends. You may lose trade. You may find doors closed to you." "I already feel doors closing," Lyria answered. "Every time a man looks at my land instead of my face, another door shuts. I would rather stand in the open with someone I trust than stay in a house built on quiet fear." Her words settled between them with a calm strength that surprised even her. She realized as she spoke that this was not only about fulfilling her father's demand or keeping her inheritance. It was about claiming her life in a way that belonged to her, not to anyone else. Ked watched her closely, reading the conviction behind every word. The main conflict that pulled them together now stood clear. On one side lay her inheritance, under threat from a powerful enemy and the slow turn of weak law. On the other lay his haunted past, followed by prejudice and danger. If they joined forces, their battles would mix. Forming something larger than either had faced alone, the fire crackled softly, and a cool gust brushed across their faces. For a brief second, Lyria had the strange feeling that the land itself waited, listening, as if it held its breath to hear what Ked would decide. He looked into the flames, then up at the field of stars, as though searching for an answer in the old patterns his people had read since long before he was born. Lyria sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, trying not to lean forward, not to show how much hung on his next words. When he finally opened his mouth to speak, his eyes met hers with a steady, unreadable calm. And instead of a clear answer, he said something that made her heart pound even harder than before. Ked's gaze did not waver when he finally spoke. "I will not give you an answer here in the open desert," he said. "A man can make brave promises with only the stars watching. I will come to your land. I will see how you live, how your enemies move, and whether our paths can truly walk side by side. Only then will I decide." Lyria's heart thumped hard in her chest. It was not the simple yes she had secretly hoped for, but it was not a refusal either. It was a promise of action, a step into her world. For a man who had chosen solitude for years, that choice carried more weight than any spoken oath. "When will you come?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "At first light," he replied. "You will ride ahead. I will follow at a distance. There are eyes in this country that do not like the sight of a woman and an Apache traveling together." She understood. The frontier carried its own cruel rules, and people were quick to twist stories into weapons. She nodded, and the decision settled over them like a thin, taut wire. Their futures were now tangled, whether the town liked it or not. They rested a few hours near the dying fire, each alone with their thoughts, the night sky stretching wide above them. Lyria dozed in short, uneasy bursts, seeing flashes of her ranch, her father's stern face, the shadow of Calder circling the property. Whenever she woke, she found Ked awake, watching the horizon as if old instincts kept him from trusting any darkness completely. Before the sun broke, Lyria mounted her horse and turned its head toward home. Ked watched her disappear into the faint gray light, then followed at a distance, true to his word. The desert gradually gave way to scrub, then to the dry edges of her property, marked by weathered fencing and a lonely windmill that creaked with each turn. When Lyria rode up the long track to the house, she felt a pang of both relief and dread. The ranch looked the same, yet everything felt different now that she was no longer entirely alone. She unsaddled her horse, pretending this was just another morning, while inside her ribs every beat reminded her that somewhere just beyond the rise, an Apache warrior paused to study her land. Ked approached only after he had circled the outer edge of the property, memorizing the lay of the ground, the angles of the barn, the weak points in the fence. He saw the prints of horses that did not belong to her, leading to the far side of the creek and back. His jaw tightened. Calder had been here more than once. When he finally rode into the yard, Lyria stepped out onto the porch. The sight of him there, tall and steady against the wind, sent a rush of mixed feelings through her. Fear of what the town would say, relief at not facing the coming storm alone, and something quieter growing beneath both. "You have been watched," Ked said by way of greeting. "Your enemy rides close to your fence. He is testing your fear." "I felt it," Lyria answered. "I just did not know how close he had come." Ked dismounted and stood with his hand on the saddle. "You brought me here to stand with you. If I stay, I will not hide in the shadows while another man circles your home." She nodded and swallowed. "Then you are welcome on this land. My father might not have understood everything about you, but he would have recognized a protector when he saw one." As the day grew brighter, the first eyes of the settlement turned toward the ranch. A ranch hand from a neighboring spread, a young man named Rylan, spotted Ked while riding to check fence lines. By midday, his quiet sighting had become talk over coffee in town. An Apache living on Lyria's ranch? Some said she had lost her mind. Others said she was inviting trouble. A few shrugged, saying it was her land to risk. But every word of gossip eventually drifted to Calder. He sat at a table near the saloon window when he heard the rumor. His hand froze halfway to his drink. An Apache on her land. The idea burned in his chest like hot iron. Not only had she refused him, she had chosen someone he felt the town would never accept. In his mind, it was an insult that demanded an answer. "Guess that inheritance of hers won't stay quiet much longer," one of the men at the bar joked. Calder forced a thin smile. "No, it will not." He spent the rest of the day in cold calculation. If he could not convince Lyria to sign the land over willingly, he would break her reputation and stir the town against her instead. An Apache on a white woman's land was a sharp tool in the hands of a man who knew how to twist fear at the ranch. Ked wasted no time. He walked the property alongside Lyria, pointing out lines of sight. Places where a man could approach unseen, windows that needed sturdier shutters. He moved with the steady patience of someone who had defended vulnerable camps before. Lyria listened, sometimes asking questions, sometimes just watching how every step he took seemed to belong to the land. "You have worked this place alone," said as they passed the empty corral. "That should have won you more respect than it has." "Respect is easy to speak of, hard to give," she answered. "They see a woman without a husband and think, 'I am unfinished.'" He glanced at her. "You are not unfinished. You are surrounded." The words were simple, yet they landed deep. Surrounded by expectation. Surrounded by danger. Surrounded by men who thought they knew better what should become of her life and legacy. Ked's clear way of naming it made her feel seen in a way she had not felt in years. As the days passed, small changes began to take root. Ked chopped wood, repaired the barn roof, and reinforced the back door. Lyria taught him how her father had rotated the grazing fields to keep the grass alive where the well tended to falter at the end of dry months. How the cattle moved when storms rolled from the mountains. They worked side by side more often than not, their movements slowly settling into a quiet rhythm. At night, they sat at the kitchen table, going over maps of the property, talking about what might happen once Calder made his next move. Ked insisted on a plan for every path the enemy might take. Lyria insisted on finding at least one path that ended with her land safe and a family rooted on it once, late in the evening. She asked the question that had been circling her mind since he arrived. "If you decide to stay," she said, fingers tracing the edge of a mug, "would you truly be willing to become a father here, on this ranch?" With all its burdens, Ked looked at her for a long moment, the lamplight catching the steady line of his gaze. Children are not burdens. They are the only reason a man should fight for land. Without them, the soil is only soil. I will not promise them until I am sure I can protect them, but I will not turn away from the idea. His answer was not yet a vow, yet it wrapped the room in a warm kind of uncertainty. Lyria felt both hope and fear rising together. The inheritance hung between them like a bridge that was not yet finished. In town, Sheriff Doran felt the pressure tightening. Calder had come to him with a complaint. All polite on the surface, but hard underneath. That Apache has no right on that woman's land, Calder said. You ought to think about the safety of the town. Folks get nervous when they see his kind so close. Doran rubbed his temples. Ked has caused no trouble that I've ever heard of, and Lyria's land is her own. She can hire whoever she wants. Calder leaned in with a practiced smile. Sure, until someone gets hurt. Then they blame the sheriff for not acting sooner. You know how this town talks. If something happens out there, I will remind everyone that you were warned. The sheriff's jaw tightened. He was tired of Calder's games, but he couldn't ignore the influence the man carried. Doran finally sighed. I will ride out there, he said. I will speak with Lyria. If there is trouble, I will deal with it my way. You stay out of it. Calder tipped his hat in false respect. I only want what is best for the community, Sheriff. When Doran rode to the ranch the next afternoon, he found Ked repairing a gate while Lyria held the post steady. The sight struck him with a strange mix of unease and reluctant admiration. They moved in quiet unity, not like a frightened woman and a dangerous stranger, but like two people bound by a common task. Afternoon, Doran called as he approached. Lyria straightened, brushing dust off her hands. Sheriff, what brings you all the way out here? I hear you have company, he said. Glancing at Kaede. Kaede set down his tools and met the sheriff's gaze without flinching. Doran saw no wildness there, only watchful calm. He is here because I asked him to be, Lyria said. This is my land, Sheriff. I am within my rights. Doran shifted in his saddle. You are, but the town is restless. Calder has been stirring talk. Folks are saying an Apache staying under your roof is trouble waiting to happen. Trouble has been circling my land long before Ked arrived, she replied. You know that. I came to you about Calder, and you sent me home with only a warning for him. Now, I am handling things my own way. The sheriff flinched at the quiet truth in her words. He looked at Ked again. I do not want blood on this soil. Not from town men, not from you. Then calm your town, Ked said softly. Their fear is the match. Not me. Doran sighed. There is talk of challenging the legality of your claim. Lyria Calder says your father promised him first refusal if you could not secure a family. I have seen no paper that shows that, but men with money often find papers when they need them. Lyria felt a rush of cold move through her body. He is lying. I believe you, Doran said. But belief does not always stand against stamped ink and witnesses who are paid to remember things that never happened. There might be a hearing. Maybe even men sent out here to pressure you. So that is it, she murmured. He tries the law, after threats fail. Ked stepped closer to her, a quiet wall of strength at her side. Let him come with his papers, he said. Land does not answer only to ink. It answers to those who work it. Doran watched the way they stood, side by side, and knew any attempt to separate them now would only bring more trouble. Yet he also knew Calder would not stop. The sheriff turned his horse. I will delay things as long as I can, he said, but you should be ready. I fear this is going to end out here, not in any town office. As he rode away, Lyria felt the fragile sense of safety she had been building begin to shake. She looked at Ked. So it comes to this, she said quietly. Our enemies with law in one hand and violence in the other. He placed a steady hand on the gate. We still have choices. We prepare the land. We prepare ourselves. And when they come, we stand. Over the next days, the ranch shifted from a quiet homestead into something more watchful. Ked showed Lyria how to mark distant dust trails, how to listen for changes in the wind, how to keep a rifle close without letting fear take the reins of her life. She practiced until her hands no longer shook when she loaded the weapon. At night she lay awake, feeling both stronger and more afraid than ever. One evening, as a storm brewed on the horizon, she stood on the porch while Ked checked the horses. The air felt thick, charged with the kind of tension that came before lightning. She moved a hand unconsciously to her middle, thinking of the children she hoped might one day run across this yard, free and safe. She thought of the promise she had made to herself and to her father's memory. Ked joined her, following her gaze toward the storm. "The sky warns of something," he said. "So does my heart," she replied. He looked at her with a rare softness. "Whatever happens, you are not alone anymore." Before she could answer, a distant sound pricked his ears. He tilted his head, listening. The faint rumble of hooves carried across the darkening fields. Not a single rider. Many Illyria felt the hair along her arms rise. "Is it the cattle, no?" he said, voice turning sharp. "They ride too fast for cattle. They are coming here." Together they moved from the porch into the yard. The last light of day stretched long shadows across the ground as a line of riders appeared on the ridge beyond the outer fence. Torches flickered in some hands, lighting cruel edges on their faces. At the front rode Calder, his figure outlined against the stormy sky, posture confident, as if he already believed the land beneath him belonged to him. Lyria's heartbeat thundered in her ears. Ked stepped slightly in front of her, his shoulders square, his presence a shield between her and the approaching danger. Behind them, the house and barn stood silent, holding all their hopes and fears. The riders began to descend the hill, the glow of their torches growing brighter with every pounding stride. The wind carried the acrid scent of smoke and the taste of a fight coming close. Lyria reached for the rifle Ked had taught her to use. Her fingers wrapped around the wood, steady in a way they had never been before. She drew in a slow breath, feeling the weight of her inheritance, her future children, and the man who chose to stand with her, all pressing into that single moment. Ked did not look back, but his voice reached her in a low, calm tone. "Stay behind me until I say otherwise. Whatever happens, do not let fear make your choice for you." She nodded, though he could not see it, and fixed her eyes on the line of riders that carried her past, her present enemy. In the storm of judgment from a harsh world, the distance between them shrank. Hooves striking the earth like a drumbeat, pushing the story toward its peak. The torches burned brighter, the sky darkened, and the frontier night braced itself for what was about to break loose on that small patch of contested land. The riders charged down the ridge, their torches flickering in the wind, their shouts echoing across the open land. Calder rode at the front, his jaw tight and his eyes fixed on the ranch house, as if he had already claimed it. Lyria felt her heartbeat pound against her ribs, but she didn't retreat. She gripped the rifle the way Ked had taught her, feet planted firm on the ground she had fought so hard to protect. The storm clouds twisted above them, low and heavy, ready to break. Ked stepped forward, planting himself like a stone in the path of the oncoming riders. His stance was calm, powerful, and unflinching. The torchlight reflected off his features, highlighting the quiet strength in them. He didn't shout or raise a weapon. He simply stood. It was enough to slow the riders. Calder pulled hard on his reins, dust lifting into the air beneath the hooves of his horse. "What are you doing on her land?" Calder demanded, pointing an accusing finger at Ked. "You're trespassing. This ranch is under new claim." Ked didn't move. "Her land is not yours to claim." Calder barked a laugh. "She has no husband, no children, no standing. The law will side with me." Arya stepped out from behind Ked, her voice firm. "The law will see you for what you are, Calder. A man who forced his way into my barn. A man who threatened me more times than I can count. A man who stands here tonight trying to take what was never his. I filed my report." Sheriff Doran warned you. Yet you still ride here with men and torches. That makes you the criminal, not me." Her voice cut through the tense night. Some of the riders shifted uneasily. They weren't expecting a confrontation backed by this kind of certainty. Calder's eyes narrowed. "You believe that Apache will protect you," he sneered. "He's only using you. He doesn't belong here." Ked finally broke his silence. "I belong wherever truth stands." The wind picked up, pulling the heat from the torches into the swirling air. Calder looked at his men, then back at Lyria. "I have witnesses who will testify. You broke the agreement with your father." "You have lies," Lyria replied. "I have the doctor, who heard my father's true words. I have neighbors who saw you circling my land at night. And I have the sheriff who kept records from the day I reported you." Calder's lips curled in anger. "Then I'll take the land by force." He kicked his horse forward, raising his torch. The riders behind him shouted, not all of them eager, but caught in the momentum of a man who refused to lose. Ked reacted faster than lightning, splitting the sky. He stepped into the path of the horse, grabbed the bridle with one powerful hand, and wrenched it sideways. The horse reared with a sharp cry, nearly throwing Calder from the saddle. The torch flew from Calder's grip and landed in the dirt, flames licking the dry earth. Lyria ran to stomp it out, her boots pressing the fire until it fizzled into glowing embers. The riders hesitated, realizing the fight was turning against them before it even began. Sheriff Doran appeared on horseback at the edge of the field, yelling for them to stop. His voice cut through the tension like a whip. "Hold it right there. All of you." The riders froze. Calder's face turned pale under the shifting torchlight. Doran dismounted and marched toward them. "I saw the dust trail from my office," he said loudly, addressing the group. "When men ride with torches toward a woman's ranch, that's not a claim hearing. That's mob intent, ain't?" One of Calder's men shifted nervously. "We're just here to help settle a dispute." "By burning her land," the sheriff snapped. "By threatening her in numbers. You'll answer to the judge for this." Calder tried to speak, but Doran cut him off. "I've talked with the doctor. I've seen your supposed agreement. The dates don't match. The signatures are forced. And this ride tonight proves everything," Lyria said. Silence fell across the field. The riders slowly lowered their torches, shame washing over some of them. Calder's power shrank in the night air, like smoke losing its fire. "Dismount," Doran ordered. "All of you." The men obeyed. Calder resisted, but two riders who had once feared him now pulled him off the saddle and held him by the arms. Calder glared at Lyria with rage and disbelief. "You'll lose everything for this," he hissed. "No," she said softly. "Tonight I claimed everything my father wanted for me." The sheriff placed Calder under arrest, tying his hands and signaling his men from town to escort him back. One by one, the riders followed, torches dying as they left the land behind. The storm wind picked up, washing away the dust of their horses. When the last torchlight faded into the distance,
Lyria
finally let the breath out of her lungs. Her knees felt weak, but she held her place. Ked stepped beside her, not touching her, just offering the calm presence she had come to rely on. "You stood strong," he said quietly. "Your father would have been proud." Lyria looked at him. "I would not have stood at all without you." Doran turned to Ked. "You did right here. The town might talk for a while, but the law will see this plain. Calder's been stirring trouble for years. Tonight proves he crossed the line." "Will the hearing still happen?" Lyria asked. "Yes," Doran said. "But after what happened tonight, it will be in your favor. The doctor will testify. Your neighbors will speak. And Ked here is witness to Calder's threats." Ked dipped his head. "I will speak." The sheriff nodded. "Your inheritance is safer than it has ever been." When Doran rode off, leaving them under the clearing sky, the storm finally broke. Not with rain, but with a soft gust that carried the scent of distant moisture. Lyria looked at Ked, the wind lifting her hair. "You came into my storm," she said. "Now everything feels different." Ked stepped closer, his voice steady. "I told you I would not promise children until I knew I could protect them. Tonight showed me what kind of woman their mother would be." Her breath caught. "And what do you see?" "I see a future," said. For the first time since her father's passing, the weight in her chest loosened. She reached out and gently took his hand. He let her, closing his fingers around hers with quiet certainty. Days later, the hearing took place. Neighbors stood with her. The doctor spoke truth. The forged paper Calder had created fell apart under questioning. The judge declared her the rightful owner with full protection under law. Calder was sentenced for attempted fraud and leading a mob to harm a resident. When Lyria returned home from the hearing, Ked waited by the corral, the horses grazing behind him. She rode up with a bright, relieved smile. He lifted her down effortlessly, steadying her by the waist. "It is done," she said, voice shaking with joy. "The land is mine. Truly mine." Ked nodded. "Then it is time for my answer."
Ow.
She swallowed. "Yes," he placed a hand over her heart, as gentle as the wind. "I will stay. I will stand beside you. I will help raise the future your father wished for. If 2 children are needed for this land to live on, then we will welcome them in time." Lyria's eyes filled, not with sorrow, but with the warmth of something beginning, and on that ranch, under the same sky that had witnessed every trial, 2 lives joined together not from desperation, but from mutual strength, respect, and hope. The seasons that followed brought new growth, new stories, and the promise of a family rooted in shared courage. The land flourished. Their bond deepened, and the inheritance that once felt like a burden became a foundation for a peaceful, enduring life. Ked had walked alone for years. Lyria had fought alone for far too long, but together they built a future that carried both their names and the legacy of the soil beneath their feet, and the ranch, once silent with fear, now echoed with the kind of life her father had always dreamed of.